Lotus Cars is a British manufacturer of sports and racing cars, famous for its Esprit, Elan, Europa and Elise sports cars and for the highly successful Team Lotus in Formula One. Lotus Cars is based at the former site of RAF Hethel, a World War II airfield in Norfolk. The company designs and builds race and production automobiles of lightweight and fine handling characteristics. It also owns the engineering consultancy Lotus Engineering, which has facilities in the United Kingdom, United States, China, and Malaysia. Lotus is owned by DRBHICOM through its subsidiary Proton, which acquired it following the bankruptcy of former owner Romano Artioli in 1996. History. The company was formed as Lotus Engineering Limited, by engineers Colin Chapman and Colin Dare, both graduates of University College, London. In 1952, the four letters in the middle of the logo stand for the initials of company founder Anthony Colin Bruce Chapman. When the logo was created, Colin Chapman's original partners Michael and Nigel Allen were led to believe that the letters stood for Colin Chapman and the Allen brothers. The first factory was situated in old stables behind the Railway Hotel in Hornsey, North London. Team Lotus, which was split off from a Lotus Engineering in 1954, was active and competitive in Formula One racing from 1958 to 1994. The Lotus Group of companies was formed in 1959. This was made up of Lotus Cars Limited and Lotus Components Limited, which focused on road cars and customer competition car production, respectively. Lotus Components Limited became Lotus Racing Limited in 1971, but the newly renamed entity ceased operation in the same year. The company moved to a purpose-built factory at Cheshunt in 1959, and since 1966 the company has occupied a modern factory and road test facility at Hethel, near Wymondham. This site is the former RAF Hethel base, and the test track uses sections of the old runway. In its early days, Lotus sold cars aimed at privateer races and trialists. Its early road cars could be bought as kits in order to save on purchase tax. The kit car era ended in the late 1960s and early 1970s, the Lotus Elan Plus 2 being the first Lotus road car not to be offered in kit form, and the Lotus Eclair and Lotus Elite of the mid-1970s being offered only in factory-built versions. After the elegant but delicate Lotus Elite of the 1950s, Lotus found critical and sales success in the 1960s with the Lotus Elan two-seater, later developed to 2+2 form. Lotus was notable for its use of fiberglass bodies, backbone chassis, and twin-cam engines, initially supplied by Coventry Climax but later replaced by Lotus Ford units. Lotus worked with Ford on the Lotus Cortina, a successful sports saloon. Another Lotus of the late 60s and early 70s was the two-seater Lotus Europa, initially intended only for the European market, which paired a backbone chassis and lightweight body with a mid-mounted Renault engine, later upgraded to the Lotus Ford twin-cam unit as used in the Elan. The Lotus 7, originating in the 1950s as a simple, lightweight open two-seater, continued in production into the early 70s. Lotus then sold the rights to produce the 7 to Caterham, which has continued to produce the car since then. By the mid-1970s, Lotus sought to move upmarket with the launch of the Elite and Eclair models, four-seaters aimed at prosperous buyers, with features such as optional air conditioning and optional automatic transmissions. The mid-engined line continued with the Lotus Esprit, which was to prove one of the company's longest-lived and most iconic models. Lotus developed its own series of four-cylinder DOHC engines, the Lotus 900 series, and later a V8 and turbocharged versions of the engines appeared in the Esprit. Variants of the 900 series engine were supplied for the the Jensen-Healey sports car and the Sunbeam Lotus hot hatchback. In the 1980s, Lotus collaborated with Vauxhall Motors to produce the Lotus Carlton, the fastest road-going Vauxhall car. Financial troubles, death of Chapman. By 1980, Group Lotus was in serious financial trouble. Production had dropped from 1,200 units per year to a mere 383. The combined reasons were that the world was in the middle of an economic recession, sales in the key United States market had virtually collapsed, and there had been limited development of the then model range. In early 1982, Chapman came to an agreement with Toyota to exchange intellectual property and applied expertise. This initially resulted in Lotus Engineering helping to develop the Mk2 Toyota Supra, also known as the Toyota Celica XX. Secondly, it allowed Lotus to launch the new Lotus XL to replace the aging Lotus A-Class. Using drivetrain and other components from Toyota enabled Lotus to sell the XL for £1,109 less than the outgoing A-Class. Looking to re-enter the North American market, Chapman was approached by young law professor and investment banking consultant Joe Bianco, who proposed a new and separate United States sales company for Lotus. By creating an unprecedented tax incentive mechanism, the new American company, Lotus Performance Cars Inc., was able to provide fresh capital to the Group Lotus in the United Kingdom. Former Ferrari North America General Manager John Speech was brought in to run LPCI, which imported the remarkable Giugiaro-designed turbo Esprit for the first time. U.S. sales began to quickly jump into triple digits annually. Chapman died of a heart attack on 16 December 1982 at the age of 54, having begun life an innkeeper's son and ended a multi-millionaire industrialist in post-war Britain. At the time of his death, the carmaker had built thousands of successful racing and road cars, and won the Formula One World Championship 7 times. At the time of his death, both Chapman and Lotus were linked with the DeLorean Motor Company scandal over the use of UK government subsidies for the production of the DeLorean DMC-12, for which Lotus had designed the chassis, chasing large sums of money which had disappeared from the DeLorean company. Lotus was besieged by Inland Revenue inspectors, who were imposed an £84 million legal protective assessment on the company. Chapman died before the full deceit unraveled, but at the subsequent trial of Fred Bushell, the Lotus accountant, the judge insisted that, had Chapman himself been in the dock, he would have received a sentence of at least 10 years. With Group Lotus near bankruptcy in 1983, through an introduction from his friend Mark Thatcher, English accountant and entrepreneur David Wickens, the founder of the world's largest vehicle remarketing business British Car Auctions, agreed to become the new company chairman, taking a combined 29% BCA personal stake in Group Lotus. Wickens negotiated with the Inland Revenue, and then brought in new investors. Merchant bank Schroeder Wag, Michael Ashcroft's Bermudian operating company Benoit, Sir Anthony Bamford of JCB. Wickens oversaw a complete turnaround in the company's fortunes, which resulted in him being called the savior of Lotus international ownership. Despite having employed designer Peter Stevens to revamp the range and design 2 new concept cars, by 1985 the British investors recognized that they lacked the required capital to invest in the required new model development to production, and sought to find a major motor manufacturing buyer. In January 1986, Wickens oversaw the majority sale of the Group Lotus companies and 100% of North American-based LPCI to General Motors, with engineer Bob Eaton a big Lotus car fan. After 4 months of controlling but co-owning Group Lotus with Toyota, the Japanese company sold out to GM. By October 1986, GM had acquired a 91% stake in Group Lotus for £22.7 million, which allowed them to legally force the company buyout. On the 27th of August 1993, GM sold the company for £30 million to a CBN Holdings SA of Luxembourg, a company controlled by Italian businessman Romano Artioli, who also owned Bugatti Automobili SPA. In 1996, a majority share in Lotus was sold to Proton, a Malaysian car company listed on the Kuala Lumpur Stock Exchange. Operations. Presently organized as Group Lotus plc, the business is divided into Lotus Cars and Lotus Engineering, as well as sports car manufacture. The company also acts as an engineering consultancy, providing engineering development, particularly of suspension, for other car manufacturers. Lotus's powertrain department is responsible for the design and development of the four-cylinder Ecotec engine found in many of GM's Vauxhall, Opel, Saab, Chevrolet and Saturn cars. The US Lotus Elise and Exige models used the 1.8L VVT Li-i4 from Toyota's late Celica GTS and the Matrix XRS, which is no longer available new. The new Exige has the same V6 as the Evora and is not available in US as a road-legal vehicle. Michael Kimberley, who had been a guiding light at Lotus in the 1970s, returned and took over as acting chief executive officer of the company and its group from May 2006. He chaired the executive committee of Lotus Group International Limited, established in February 2006, with Saeed Zainal Abidin and Badrul Faisal. LGIL is the holding company of Lotus Group plc. Kimberley retired as CEO on 17 July 2009, replaced on 1 October 2009 by the former Senior Vice President for Commercial and AMP brand at Ferrari, Danny Bahar. Bahar intended to drive the brand upmarket into the expanding global luxury goods sector, effectively away from the company's traditional lightweight and pure driving experience simplicity. Bahar was suspended as CEO on 25 May 2012 on a temporary basis, while an investigation into his conduct was undertaken. Lotus announced on 7 June 2012 the termination of Bahar's employment, and the appointment of Aslam Farikula as the new Chief Operating Officer. The ambitious plans for several new models were subsequently cancelled. Formula One and Motorsport. In its early days, the company encouraged its customers to race its cars, and it first entered Formula One through its sister company Team Lotus in 1958. A Lotus Formula One car driven by Stirling Moss won the Marque's first Grand Prix in 1960 at Monaco. Moss drove a Lotus 18 entered by privateer Rob Walker. Major success came in 1963 with the Lotus 25, which with Jim Clark driving, won Team Lotus its first F1 World Constructors' Championship. Clark's untimely death, he crashed a Formula 2 Lotus 48 in April 1968 after his rear tire failed in a turn in Hockenheim, was a severe blow to the team into Formula One. He was the dominant driver in the dominant car and remains an inseparable part of Lotus's early years. That year's championship was won by Clark's teammate, Graham Hill. Team Lotus is credited with making the mid-engined layout popular for Indy cars, developing the first monocoque Formula One chassis, and the integration of the engine and transaxle as chassis components. Team Lotus was also among the pioneers in Formula One in adding wings and shaping the undersurface of the car to create downforce, as well as the first to move radiators to the sides of the car to aid in aerodynamic brake performance, and inventing active suspension. Even after Chapman's death, until the late 1980s, Team Lotus continued to be a major player in Formula One. Ayrton Senna drove for the team from 1985 to 1987, winning twice in each year and achieving 17 pole positions. By the company's last Formula One race in 1994, the cars were no longer competitive. Team Lotus constructed cars won a total of 79 Grand Prix races. During his lifetime, Chapman saw Lotus beat Ferrari as the first marque to achieve 50 Grand Prix victories, despite Ferrari having won the first 9 years sooner. Formula One Constructors' Championships 1963, 1965, 1968. 1970, 1972, 1973, 1978. Team Lotus established Classic Team Lotus in 1992 as the work's historic motorsport activity. Classic Team Lotus continues to maintain Lotus F1 cars and run them in the FIA Historic Formula One Championship, and it preserves the Team Lotus Archive and Works collection of cars, under the management of Colin Chapman's son, Clive. Team Lotus's participation in Formula One ended at the end of the 1994 season. Former racing driver David Hunt purchased the name Team Lotus's and licensed it to the Formula One team Pacific Racing, which was rebranded Pacific Team Lotus. The Pacific team folded at the end of the 1995 season. The Lotus name returned to Formula One for the 2010 season, when a new Malaysian team called Lotus Racing was awarded an entry. The new team used the Lotus name on license from Group Lotus, and was unrelated to the original Team Lotus. In September 2010, Group Lotus, with agreement from its parent company Proton, terminated the license for future seasons as a result of what it called flagrant and persistent breaches of the license by the team. Lotus Racing then announced that it had acquired Team Lotus Ventures Limited, the company led by David Hunt, and with it full ownership of the rights of the Team Lotus brand and heritage. The team confirmed that it would be known as Team Lotus from 2011 onwards. In December 2010, Group Lotus announced the creation of Lotus Renault GP, the successor to the Renault F1 team. This team contested the 2011 season, having purchased a title sponsorship deal with the team, with the option to buy shares in the future. The team's car for that season, the R31, was badged as a Renault, while Team Lotus's car, the T128, was badged as a Lotus. In May 2011, the British High Court of Justice ruled that Team Lotus could continue to use the Team Lotus name, but Group Lotus had sole right to use the Lotus name on its own. As a consequence, for 2012, Lotus Renault GP was rebranded as Lotus F1 Team and its cars were badged as Lotuses, while Team Lotus was renamed Caterham F1 Team and its cars were badged as Caterhams. Group Lotus is currently also involved in several other categories of motorsport. It sponsors the KV team in the IndyCar series, and used to sponsor the ART team in the GP2 and GP3 series in 2011 and AMP 2012. In 2011, Lotus also returned to the 24 Hours of Le Mans with a semi-works effort run by Jet Alliance Racing, which fielded 2 Lotus Evoras, after fielding underpowered and uncompetitive engines in the 2012 Indianapolis 500, in which drivers Gene Alesi and Simona de Silvestro were black-flagged after 10 laps for failing to maintain a competitive pace. Lotus was released from its contract and did not participate in future seasons. Lotus car models. Current Lotus models include Lotus Elise. The Elise was launched in 1996 and weighed 725 kilograms. The current model starts at 901 kilograms and incorporates some engineering innovations, such as an aluminium extrusion frame and a composite body shell. The Elise has spawned several racing variants, including a limited series called the 340R, which has an open-body design echoing the old 7. The Elise was introduced into the US with a Toyota engine, to pass strict US emissions laws. The 1ZZ and AMP-2ZZ Toyota engines used to have a Lotus AQ with their own fuel mapping. The supercharged Lotus Elise S Limited Edition Jim Clark Type 25 Elise editions add a new performance dimension to the Elise range. 0 to 60 miles per hour acceleration is in 4.3 seconds and 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in 4.6 seconds. Lotus Exige S. Currently the only Exige on sale is the Exige S with a supercharged engine providing 345 bhp from supercharged 3.5-liter EV6. Lotus Evora, launched the 22nd of July 2008. Code-named Project Eagle during development. A 2+2 sports car with a mid-mounted, transverse 3.5-liter EV6 engine. Lotus will provide the Evora S model as rapid-response vehicles to the Roman Milan Carabinieri to replace the previous Lamborghini Gallardos. See Lotus webpage. A facelifted and more powerful Evora 400 model was unveiled at the 2015 Geneva Motor Show. Lotus T125 Exos, track-only Formula One-inspired car. 3.5L Cosworth V8, 640 bhp, 25 will be built at $1 million each, to run in the Exos Experience by Lotus's a club, initiated and operated by Lotus Motorsport, in which a limited number of owner-drivers can refine their driving skills and challenge themselves with expert one-to-one advice from former Grand Prix drivers and trainers. Also, previous holder of the fastest Top Gear lap time, although it was disqualified for not being able to meet the requirements of getting over a speed bump. Previous Lotus Mark 1 Austin 7 base sports car. Lotus Mark 2 Ford Power Trials car. Lotus Mark 3 750cc Formula car. Lotus Mark 4 Trials car. Lotus Mark 5 750cc Formula car, never built. Lotus Mark 6, the first production racer, about 100 built. Lotus 7, a minimalist open sports car designed to maneuver a racing circuit. Lotus Mark 8, sports racer, MG 1.5L. Lotus Mark 9, sports racer, shorter and improved 8. Lotus Mark 10, sports racer for larger displacement, Bristol, BMW 2L. Lotus 11, small displacement sports racer. Lotus 12, Formula 2 and Formula 1 race car. Lotus 13, designation not used. Lotus 14, Lotus Elite, the first production street car. Lotus 15, sports racer, update of the MK X Climax 1.5 to 2.5L. Lotus 16, F1 F2 car, miniature van wall. Lotus 17, lighter sports racer, update of the 11 in response to Lola MK.I. Lotus 18, first mid-engined Lotus single-seater, Formula Junior, F2, F1. Lotus 19, mid-engined larger displacement sports racer, Monte Carlo. Lotus 20, Formula Junior. Lotus 21, a Formula 1. Lotus 22, Formula Junior, F3. Lotus 23, small displacement mid-engine sports racer. Lotus 24, Formula One. Lotus 25, a Formula One World Champion. Lotus 26, Lotus Elan, production street sports car. Lotus 26, a racing version of Elan. Lotus 27, Formula Junior. Lotus 28, Lotus version of the Ford Cortina street racer. Lotus 29, Indy car, Ford all-aluminium OHV small block V8. Lotus 30, large displacement sports racer. Lotus 31, a Formula 3 space frame racer. Lotus 32, monocoque F2 and Tasman Cup racer. Lotus 33, Formula One World Champion. Lotus 34, IndyCar, DOHC Ford V8. Lotus 35, F2, F3, FB. Lotus 36, Elan fixed head coupe. Lotus 38, Indy winning mid-engined car. Lotus 39, Tasman Cup Formula car. Lotus 40, sports racer, a development of the 30. Lotus 41, a Formula 3, Formula 2, Formula B. Lotus 42, Indy car, Ford V8. Lotus 43, a Formula 1. Lotus 44, Formula 2. Lotus 45, convertible Elan with permanent side window frames. Lotus 46, original Renault-engined Europa. Lotus 47, racing version of Europa. Lotus 48, Formula 2. Lotus 49, a Formula One World Champion. Lotus 50, Lotus Elan Plus 2, 4-seat production car. Lotus 51, Formula Ford. Lotus 52, prototype Europa twin cam. Lotus 53, small displacement sports racer, never built. Lotus 54, Series 2, Europa, production car. Lotus 55, F3, Lotus 56, Indy turbine wedge. Lotus 56B, F1 turbine wedge. Lotus 57, F2 design study. Lotus 58, F1 design study. Lotus 59, F2, F3, Formula Ford. Lotus Lux, Lotus Elite built to win at Le Mans with a 2.0 LFPF engine. Lotus 60, Lotus 7S4, greatly modified version of the 7. Lotus 61, a Formula Ford, the wedge. Lotus 62, prototype Europa racer. Lotus 63, four-wheel drive F1. Lotus 64, four-wheel drive Indy car, did not compete. Lotus 65, federalized Europa S2. Lotus 66, designation not used. Lotus 67, proposed Tasman Cup car, never built. Lotus 68, F5000 prototype. Lotus 69, F2, F3, Formula Ford. Lotus 70, F5000, Formula A. Lotus 71, undisclosed design study. Lotus 72, a Formula One World Champion. Lotus 73, F3, Lotus 74, Europa twin cam production car. Lotus 75, Elite 2, luxury 4-seat GT. Lotus 76, F1, redundant designation. Lotus 76, A-Class S1, fastback version of Elite 2, redundant designation. Lotus 77, F1, Lotus 78, F1 ground effects car. Lotus 79, Lotus Esprit, street GT, redundant designation. Lotus 79, Formula One World Champion, redundant designation. Lotus 80, F1, Lotus 81, Sunbeam Talbot Lotus, redundant designation. Lotus 81, F1, redundant designation. Lotus 82, Turbo Esprit, street GT car. Lotus 83, Elite Series 2. Lotus 84, A-Class Series 2. Lotus 85, Esprit Series 3. Lotus 86, F1 dual chassis, never raced. Lotus 87, F1, Lotus 88, F1 dual chassis car, and Lotus 89, Lotus XL GT, re-engineered A-Class. Lotus 90, unreleased Elan, Toyota. Lotus 91, F1, Lotus 92, F1, Lotus 93T, F1 Turbo. Lotus 9040, F1 Turbo. Lotus 95T, F1 Turbo. Lotus 96D, IndyCar project, abandoned. Lotus 97T, F1 Turbo. Lotus 98T, F1 Turbo. Lotus 99T, F1 Turbo, last Lotus F1 winner. Lotus 100T, F1 Turbo. Lotus Elan, front-drive convertible Elan. Lotus 101, F1, Lotus 102, F1, Lotus 103, F1, not produced. Lotus 104, Lotus Carlton, a mega-tuned version of the Opel Vauxhall Saloon. Lotus 105, Racing X180 IMSA Supercars Drivers Champ. Lotus 106, X180 Road-Going Homologation Special. Lotus 107, F1, Lotus 108, a bicycle ridden by Chris Boardman to win a gold medal at the 1992 Barcelona Olympics, also known as the Lotus Sport Pursuit bicycle. Lotus 109, F1, last Lotus F1 car. Lotus 110, production version of Type 108 bicycle. Lotus 111, Lotus Elise. Lotus 112, partial F1 design, reached as far as the monocoque buck. Lotus 113, number not allocated. Lotus 114, Lotus Esprit GT1 race car. Lotus 115, Lotus Elise GT1 race car. Lotus 116, Opel Speedster Vauxhall VX220, a collaboration with Opel. Lotus 117, Lotus Elise SU. Lotus 118, Lotus M250, two-seat mid-range sports car concept unveiled in autumn of 1999, project cancelled in 2001. Lotus 119, soapbox derby car made of carbon and aluminium, disc brakes, no engine, the Goodwood Festival of Speed. Lotus 120, Elise V6, code-named M120, never produced. Lotus 121, Europa S. Lotus 122, Lotus Evora. Lotus 123, Lotus 211, Lotus 124, Lotus Evora race car. Lotus 125, Lotus Exos. Announcements of future cars at the 2010 Paris Motor Show. Lotus announced 5 new models to be introduced over the next 5 years. Their intention was to replace the Elise with an entirely different model, as well as to introduce 2 entirely new sports coupes, which would have been known as the Elite and the Elan, a new sports saloon, the Eterne, to rival the Aston Martin Rapide and Maserati Quattroporte, and a modern interpretation of the Esprit supercar. It became apparent in July 2012 that the firm's financial difficulties had made this plan impossible to implement, and initially all but the Esprit project were cancelled. Subsequently, the Esprit project was also cancelled. Lotus also showed an unnamed city car concept using its 1.2L range extender engine. In 2011, Lotus revealed this as the Lotus Ethos, a plug-in hybrid car based on the MS concept from its parent company Proton, and likely to be primarily built by Proton in Malaysia. This car has also been cancelled. Lotus engines. Lotus Ford Twin Cam. Lotus 918 V8 range extender engine. This all-aluminium, monoblock 1200cc, 3-cylinder, 47 horsepower, 4-stroke engine is specifically designed to directly drive an alternator for electricity generation for series hybrid cars. The engine is small and light at 56 kilograms, having 3 cylinders and no detachable cylinder head. The cylinder head and engine block are all one casting to reduce size, weight and production costs. As the engine does not turn belt-driven ancillaries such as alternator, power steering pump or an air conditioning compressor, the block requires no strong points to accommodate such ancillaries, resulting in a simple and light block. The engine has a reduced parts count for lightness and cheaper production. On the 18th of August 2011, Lotus fired up an all-new in-house designed V8 destined for the new era range of cars. At 170 kilograms and just 612 millimeters long, the unit will be dry-sump lubricated to save depth and will feature a 180 degrees flat plane crank. The engine is being utilized as a stress component, a technique pioneered by Chapman in F1, specifically with the 1967 Type 49. It is expected to be used in the Le Mans LMP2 car in 2012. Expected performance is likely to be in excess of 590 PS and with a 9,200 revolutions per minute redline.